Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's panel. The title of today's panel is The State of Collegiate Esports. My hope and goal for our time today is to paint a picture for our viewers of the current state of the landscape of collegiate through the eyes of some of the CEOs behind the largest entities in the space. Thank you all for being here. We only have about an hour to achieve the goal I've set out, so let's get started. We will begin with a short intro of each person, name, title, and what organization you represent. Most of our viewers already know your organization, so we can keep the explanation short. And I'll start. My name is Antor. I am the director of esports at Florida Southern College. I also currently serve as the chair of the NACE Competition Council. Andrew, how about you go next?
I'm Andrew Barnett. I'm the CEO of LeagueSpot, and I am happy it's Friday today.
There you go. Rob.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rob Johnson. I'm the CEO of CSL Esports, and also happy it's Friday.
And Michael.
Hello, I'm Michael Brooks. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Collegiate Esports. I, too, am ecstatic it's Friday.
I'm glad you're all happy.
Covering all the hard topics, guys.
Let's wrap it up. Dan, go ahead.
Dan Coonan, Commissioner of the ECAC. We have traditional sports, and we have for 85 years, and the last 5 years, we're doing esports as well.
And
thanks for having me.
And growing and doing a great job at it, from what I've been told. Thanks for being here. And finally, Charlie.
Hi, everybody. Charles Murray. I'm the esports coordinator for SUNY Canton and also the commissioner for SUNY Esports, the esports league for the state of New York.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, thank you guys again for being here. Let's hop into first topic. Our entire industry and the world at large has been affected by COVID the last 2 years. How has COVID impacted collegiate esports in your opinion, and where do we go from here? How about we start with Charlie?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think what we've seen is a lot of investment come from COVID into esports, especially for my league. My league was born out of investment into esports during the COVID, I guess we can call it the COVID era, because they were looking for an online alternative to student engagement. Because if you can't engage students in a classroom, you can't engage them in an auditorium. Can you engage them at a distance safely during COVID? Yes, esports was a great answer for that. So during the past, when COVID was really raging, we had a lot of investment, and many universities across our system have invested now into spaces. So when COVID's over, fingers crossed, when it's over, they'll have a really awesome space to go back and play in for a lot of these universities.
Awesome. And you're kind of our representation, I guess, more from a school side. I guess the closest to it. Do you see that investment being lowered once COVID kind of lifts in your instance?
I think some of these universities where maybe they implement it specifically because of COVID, I know at least my university has doubled down because we saw so much enrollment coming to the university. So if you're a university listening to this, I highly suggest that you do an FIA on your program after you do invest, because you can see an ROI pretty clearly. All you have to do is make sure that you're following retention, recruitment, and you can see that the programs pay for themselves.
Awesome. Let's kind of grow up into the scope from the school level or the school system level up to the conference level. Dan, how has COVID impacted the ECAC, and where do we go from there?
Well, I think it's remarkable how much esports has grown during the COVID era, intercollegiate esports, and it. To be honest, it was a godsend for the ECAC because it was so much of our traditional sports went dormant during, we have 250 schools with us for intercollegiate traditional sports, and so much of that was dormant. But we doubled the size of our esports organization because we could go virtual with our leagues in the fall and our leagues in the spring, and I think that intercollegiate esports really kind of took off in that era as well, the last couple of years of COVID. So it's been an interesting thing. It had a very good impact on the ECAC, really.
Moving to NACE, Michael Brooks, how has COVID impacted NACE and its goals?
Um, a lot. So we, I think like everyone else, right? We had schools competing from their esports facilities on campus. We were planning for our in-person national championships. And then curveball thrown at everyone in March, right? No in-person events. We scrambled quickly. Thankfully, we were able to pivot pretty quickly to online competition with online finals and broadcasting that. And that's continued since then to this day. We are planning to go back to in-person events, but I will say from basically March of when COVID first reared its face and to today, it basically we grew immensely. Just a number of institutions are interested in just even research and data on what collegiate esports looks like and how it's performing, to schools with active programs increasing their sizes. Um, for us at the organizational level, it gave us the opportunity to kind of reapproach how and why we're doing things. It identified areas of partnership where we can actually start rowing in the same direction. CSL, our partners over there, I'm sure Rob's going to speak later, was a part of that, right? Like, how can we start organizing ourselves collectively and really, taking a huge evolutionary step from where collegiate esports was to where it is today?
Yeah, speaking of the partnership, Rob, there's been a lot of changes with CSL the last 2 years. Some of that might have been because of COVID, some of it just trajectory growth. How has CSL been affected by COVID, and where did we go from here from CSL's perspective?
It fundamentally changed and altered the direction that the company was going. And a little over 18 months ago, Collegiate StarLeague and also World Gaming were owned by Cineplex, a Canadian movie theater operator. So over the last 18 months, the company has been sold. Obviously, we came on board with a new team. We brought some of our team members with us, moved it to Philadelphia, and really doubled down on Collegiate as CSL Esports and being able to shift the growth of our league to how can we pour all of our resources into growing this, sustaining this. We know COVID has been awful for everybody, but we do know it made a lot more gamers, and it made colleges and a lot of these universities, even high schools, start to look to see, okay, we have all these gamers. How can we make sure that they are getting the higher education? How can we use gaming as a tool for learning? So we built a business around what the market need had become. And then obviously we put together NACE StarLeague. So starting in the fall, working with NACE as a nonprofit to be able to have a foundation and have a league that we can start to build a framework that we can build and bring in other partners within the industry and start to, as Michael said, row in the right direction. I'm a collegiate rower, so I'm going to say row in the right direction. But being able to, find ways that all the people on this call, and listen, we all talk and we all work together, but in order to be more inclusive to the rest of the communities and the rest of the business themselves. So COVID caused that fundamental transition for our business. It caused the sale of this business. Playfly Sports is our parent company now. So we're able to grow a lot more efficiently and effectively with schools on campus, within the framework of multimedia rights, which we can talk about later here, but is able to help fund these programs. And for new schools that want to get started and don't know how, or a lot of these administrations that really know that this is something that their campus need, we, and a collective we, everybody on this call, is able to help those programs now thrive based on some of the changes that we've all had to make and pivot during COVID.
Absolutely. And from the platform perspective, we have Andrew of LeagueSpot. How has COVID affected LeagueSpot and its growth?
Well, I say this a little facetiously, but I started working with most of you during COVID, so that was a benefit. No, but in all seriousness, and my answer, and this is something that I want to talk about broader later on when we start talking about the deeper future, 3 to 5 years. I recorded a webinar yesterday for the YMCA, and we had met with a couple of the Y CEOs across the board to talk about esports as a Y movement and how it's going to, basically, how is it going to get from here until what it needs to look like 3 to 5 years from now, where it's kind of a mainstream. In a lot of my perspective, there has been that we need stakeholder buy-in from everybody. That includes parents. That includes anyone from the CEO level down to the operational level of whether it's brands, whether it's recreation facilities. We need them from the people running it, and we need it from the kids. And one of the things that I think COVID, as unfortunate as it was, did a really good thing for esports and gaming in this industry holistically, is that it forced a lot of parents and business owners and everyone across the board to look at this as a real thing. They were at home, kids had nothing else to do than play video games, and oh look, there's this whole thing called esports that I didn't even know about as a parent, and now it's been legitimized as a real activity. Schools are investing into it. There's awareness. And so although COVID has obviously has been horrible, and I don't wish it upon the world, it has been good for our industry, in my personal opinion.
That's fair. I'm sure you all have stories that you could touch on of a non-endemic company to esports or gaming reaching out to you guys and asking, how do I get into esports? I think one of the problems, I think, is oftentimes people in those outside of the esports industry hears about esports and automatically thinks, oh, this is the next big thing. Like, we're going to make millions off of this one small tournament we do. We just have to slap esports on it and they'll be here. And I know you guys probably have a
lowercase s, everybody. Esports, lowercase s.
Thank you. Let's
We're all laughing because we all universally agree. Like,
Yeah.
it's so ridiculous, right? Yeah.
Yes.
No hyphen either. I still see that sometimes.
Correct. Yeah. And yeah, if anyone follows my Twitter, you know where I stand on that subject. But it's usually my esports 101 lesson with a non-endemic company. But thank you guys for answering that question on COVID. I think it's interesting to frame it kind of in this time. And related to framing collegiate esports in this time, I think one massive topic we have that we're trying to address and continually answering questions about is diversity. When we first planned this panel, we saw the announcement, we knew who was being invited. And instead of trying to lose the opportunity to have a discussion because of the lack of diversity on the CEO level, we chose to run at it. And we chose to bring it up as a topic today because I think it's really important for all of us to discuss, to acknowledge, and to continue to uplift and support diversity in our industry. I think what's really interesting, and I think what's really important when I'm working with students, is to realize that, yes, I might be the leader of the program right now, but the students that we're creating right now and uplifting are the leaders who are going to take this and run with it even further. So I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to talk about what your organizations are doing to promote diversity, to uplift those who are diverse, and kind of just let it go. And in terms of letting you guys just talk. So on this one, let's start with Michael Brooks, since you asked to start it.
I didn't ask. I was volunteered.
Okay,
You were voluntold.
I'm happy to speak to it. This is incredibly important. Like as an organization in higher education, as a nonprofit, personally, it's incredibly important to me. Not only do we have obligations, all right, with Title IX included, but we also have aspirations, and both those are pointing us in a direction that we need to go, and also saying that there's a problem, a significant one. Nobody's developed a silver bullet type solution, right? Something that just solves everything and we're all good to go, everything's rosy. What we're looking at, it's a long uphill climb, and it doesn't just start with us. So in our case, so with our member institutions, we look at intercollegiate esports competition as being co-ed, right? We don't differentiate between a male esports program or a female esports program or anything in between. It's all together, right? That we don't see a reason or a difference on why there should be a difference. Some organizations have, though, and that's totally fine. But what we've done is we actually have in our own Discord, right? We have an area where all the women leaders, our coaches, our directors are all part of that. And we even asked, like, is this something that we need to take a look at? And the overwhelming response was no, that's not the issue. The issue is, we just want more to have the opportunity made available to them. So with what we're doing, we're primarily looking at partnerships. I'm not the biggest fan of creating something just to be in the space. I'm a much bigger fan, and this is in part how NACE has always existed and how NACE has grown, is identifying good actors in the space that you recognize as something that you want to participate in, but maybe not do, maybe not take ownership of, maybe not assume that you're the expert of, and just wrap your arms around them, bring them right in, right? That's absolutely what we're looking to do. We are also looking to basically aim lower in terms of ages. So we're all in the collegiate space. By the time that our coaches, our directors are recruiting for the most part, they're looking at high school seniors, right? Uh, at that point in time, we missed the train, right? The preferences, the self-identification of like, am I welcomed as a competitor, as a woman, for instance? Um, that's gone. That was decided at a much earlier point. I think things are getting better. We have a ton of great organizations in the high school space. We have organizations now reaching down in the middle school space. So those ideas are changing, and we're going to see that reflected in the collegiate space. It is a function of time to get there, and we need to be basically nurturing that all the way through. So we are working with a number of high school organizations to help facilitate, provide more resources. Um, and that's just on gender, right? The other area that I don't think gets as much attention is there's racial issues as well. It's overwhelmingly, I think, at all of our orgs, but certainly we've done the research on our side, which is accounting for most of the varsity space. It is white males who are participating on the competition side. We do see much more diversity on all the support elements. So whether you're the shoutcaster, graphic design, team manager, an analyst, right? There's much greater diversity there, but on the actual competitive players, overwhelmingly white male, and that's another issue. I think the same issues at play, with maybe some economic issues as well in terms of, well, what are we playing on? Well, we're playing on PC for the most part, but is a gaming PC readily accessible for everyone equally? I think generally would say no. So how we look at actually what tools we're using to compete, I think, is going to fundamentally shift as we go forward as well.
That's a really good point. How about on the school level, Charlie? What from your school system? Sorry, I keep saying school, but it's
okay.
massive. So what's SUNY doing about diversity and promoting diversity?
Yeah, so that's a great point, and we have been very active in making not just active but proactive because, like Michael said, we are aware of the demographics of our industry. We are aware of the students that are coming in and the demographics of that age group that are coming into the college space to play video games. So, for those of you who don't have the context, SUNY is a school system within New York State. There are 64 schools within SUNY, universities rather within SUNY, and I run the esports conference for that. So what we've done is we've actually taken a look at our players. We've polled our players, and we've started to make women's events. So this is something that's in very early development stages, but I know it's at least been announced to internally among the conference. I don't know if we've promoted it among social channels within SUNY proper, but we have propagated the idea within our own Discord. So making sure that the women that we have, and this is something that I really saw at Canton, the women that we have, they show themselves as leaders. They show that they can be accepted in the space. And like I have many women in my esports program at Canton, speaking specifically just as a coordinator, that they the women that come in, the freshmen that are maybe fresh out of high school, they look up to some of these senior women that have been there a long time. So establishing that like cycle of positive role models is something that I'm really trying to do as part of my community. But like Michael said, a lot of this stuff is baked in before they come to us. So it's almost like we have to rewrite a little bit of the code in their brain when they get here and kind of demystify some of these, like, that women aren't welcome or that it's a toxic space towards women. Because if a program's done right, and I think a lot of them in SUNY have done it right, and I think everyone here has done it right, it's a supportive place. So it's all about making sure that they're supported, that they're valued, and that there is a positive role model cycle in place.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about the last part. I just want to add something in because I think, from my perspective, in some of the leagues we've operated, and as recent as last year, all female teams have come on and been harassed and it happens. And I have seen it. We've got people on the LeagueSpot side who are part of these women in gaming initiatives and are joining these leagues and wanting to be a part of it, and they're being harassed on Twitter because oh well, there shouldn't be all women's league, it should be all everything. And I see it, and I want to get a little more provocative about this part of the conversation, because from my perspective, like we have a situation here, like let's call it what it is, right? We're on a panel where a majority of the people here are white, we're all men, and it's something that we want to talk about. And I am not of the experience to say like, hey, here's what we need to do. What I can say is that I think if all of these spaces were a little more welcoming, like Charlie was talking about, you're going to get a situation where people come in and just like me, right, got involved in gaming early and set up, I want to go start a company. I want to go be hired as an executive. I want to be in marketing. I want to go make my way up there. And the opportunities are growing, but I don't know if it's there yet. And I guess my question is how does the space from a culture become a little more welcoming to help generate some of those opportunities? That's an open question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm going to push it to Dan to take it over and talk a little bit, maybe from the traditional athletic side. Is this an issue that you guys struggle with in traditional athletics as well? I know there aren't many co-ed opportunities in athletics, but I'm sure this is something that's discussed on the other side as well.
Yeah, and with Title IX, the NCAA, they've been dealing with this since the 70s, and I think that when the NCAA created a senior women's administrator, that really did wonders for the employees. There's different ways to look at this. You look at the participants, diversity among the participants. You look at diversity among the workforce, and that, I think it did wonders in terms of bringing that along. And I'll just mention for us, for example, Lydia Pfister is a very capable woman who is running our esports organization. I run the whole ECAC, but she's our associate commissioner and director of esports. We also partnered with CSMG, and their esports organization is run by another very capable woman, Angela Munger Thomas. And you can look at the workforce and see, as I think as was mentioned, that there is some diversity, but clearly among the participants, we have work to do. And at the ECAC, we've tried some women-only events just to get people familiar with gaming, maybe if they're intimidated to join the co-ed leagues and all. But we've got a long way to go on that. And I do think not the NCAA, the Office of Civil Rights eventually will come for esports.
For sure.
You don't really see it happening now, but much like they have in traditional sports, they've been very aggressive over the course of the history of Title IX with traditional sports. I think they're going to eventually with esports, and so we've got to get our arms around this unquestionably. I also will say, there are some elements. We have a couple of deaf participants at a couple of our schools, and the way that esports it's set up so it can be you can achieve it. There's nothing different about a man or a woman that makes them better or worse at esports. So it's set up for success there, but we're not there yet, and we need to achieve it.
Absolutely. And from my experience on the school level, sometimes it's just opening the door and creating a safe opportunity to get them started. A lot of the women in our program started by playing in our open arena and then starting a conversation with them and inviting them in a little bit more just through the action has opened up those opportunities for a lot of the women in our program. Rob, how is CSL kind of addressing the diversity problem in gaming?
Yeah, and I won't reiterate what Michael said about NACE and NACE StarLeague, and the fabric of the league itself is inclusive and welcoming by design. It's free to play for anybody to get in. It is general neutral. But what I do want to talk about specifically with this group is we have a unique opportunity to fix something that really traditional sports may have gotten wrong, and definitely probably did get wrong over the last 100 years. We have an inclusive sport that anybody can be able to play as long as they have access. So I think the challenge for us is not only to have a welcoming community, to have a place where people feel safe, regardless of really where they came from, socioeconomic, or how they identify, but to build that framework. That's on everybody on this chat right now. And particularly from the high school level, how college will impact how high school kids are looking at this. Listen, I went to Atlantic City High School, and it's not the richest high school. And I had an opportunity, because I was a rower, to go to college. And many of my friends did not. If you can't hit a jump shot, or certainly hit a ball out of the park, your opportunities weren't a lot. And there's still not a lot for many Americans. And what esports can do, and what I challenge everybody here to do, is to be able to provide that opportunity and access, to provide that level to get to higher education through esports. And we have the ability to do it. I think we have the will to do it with the people here. And it starts with many of the actions that everybody here has taken. It's not enough. And for us to solve something that, for over 100 years has been a problem in traditional sports, I think we collectively as an industry have a chance to rewrite this the right way.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you guys for answering that. I think, yeah, absolutely. I think it's a topic we're all very aware of, and something that we're all trying to address. Let's shift focus here. We're going to talk about publisher exclusivity next. So IP law, intellectual property law, is obviously pretty unique in the collegiate athletic space, if you will, as compared to our traditional athletic counterparts. And it's also become a kind of a hot topic lately, specifically in the high school space, but also a source of potential uncertainty in the collegiate space, and almost fear in my kind of from my perspective. Let's talk about exclusivity. What does the IP situation look like in collegiate esports right now, and where do we go from here, and what are we afraid of? And this one, I'm going to start with Rob on this one first.
But yeah, listen, I don't think anybody here is afraid of anything, but let me be clear. This esports is unique that we're playing with a ball somebody else owns. So each of us, and whoever is operating within esports, a tournament operator, you're a steward of that IP. So there's certain things you need to make sure that you have a relationship with a publisher, or you're holding that in the right regard. There's a ton of people that spend a ton of hours and a ton of money making these great games that we're able to play. So first and foremost, being able to do that at a high level, to respect that there are IP holders, I think that's a key that is glossed over a lot. I will say emphatically that exclusivity between tournament operators, it only holds this industry back from growing. It only sets us backwards in how we can advance diversity within esports. And there's no other industry, and I'll just talk about the United States for a second, but there's really no other industry where you have one player that does one product. I think we've had antitrust and monopoly laws for quite a long time, showing us that every Uber needs a Lyft. And exclusivity, it's not only something that is holding this industry back if somebody thinks like that, but it's also it's un-American almost. So in my eyes, and what CSL Esports, listen, we will never go after an exclusive. I don't think that that's anywhere near the realm of where we're at in esports. We want people to play. We want more people playing. We want to have a bigger pool of people that like certain games, and communities that can come together and go to college and compete in college and higher education that wouldn't have an opportunity otherwise. So specifically in high school, to remove that opportunity from kids, that's not something that I agree with for sure. And you can see in some of the titles that have people that claim exclusivity, I've seen it in our leagues and in high school broadly, the game decline in play. So that's not healthy for the publishers either. So, the fact that it is a discussion and something that somebody thinks is a good idea, publisher or operator or not, I don't feel is going to advance what we're doing here in esports collectively. It's not going to advance the industry at all.
It's a great point. I don't know who wants to take kind of the reins from here, this perspective. And whoever does, if you want to talk about those relationships with developers, how are developers looking at collegiate in these talks about licensing and exclusivity?
Yeah, well, and I talked about this at NACE, and I give it probably 5-10 minutes of that talk to explain my thoughts on that matter. But from the perspective of these publishers, and at NACE, it was a very educational audience. Many of the leaders of these state nonprofits who are looking at these companies who are engaging in these exclusive agreements, they're saying like, how could you do this to my kids? I've got kids who are struggling, who don't have money, who can't go play in this, who are in free lunch and in many times can't afford to eat. And we're providing this opportunity. We're attempting to do it for free. How could you take this away from me? And I think what you see is two ships passing in the night. And it's not that these publishers disagree with that concept, and they never would. I mean, that would be crazy to think that. Many of the people who work there came from the same place. What they're looking for is they're looking to be able to control the outcome of how their product is unveiled to this industry. And from their perspective, they're looking at, as I've said, a P&L, a financial model. They're looking to pick someone who has money and scale and the ability to make this as great as it should be, and is it going to go away in a year? And they look to for-profit big companies who are raising money to do that as that opportunity. I publicly at that conference, I said I don't agree with the way that they do that. I still don't. I fundamentally believe that a competitive market that forces prices down and forces experience to be better, where these companies have to compete for these kids and these parents and these educators' attention, is the one that is best for everybody. But I do think it's important to understand the perspective to find a way to meet in the middle, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. I'll add a little bit here. So to me, it's not just a publisher, right? So there's publishers going to get multiple asks from existing organizations, new organizations who have investor capital to basically get exclusivity, because it's a crutch, right? If a lot of kids want to play this game and they want to play it competitively, if I wipe the whole board and I'm the only option, that is something you can build a business on, unfortunately. Um, and let me be frank, that it is a business strategy, it's a business solution. It's not one we're in favor of. It's obviously one we've never embarked with. Um, for NACE, and I would say probably all the organizations here, right? We don't look for exclusivity of the publishers. We don't lock schools under contracts. Every single NACE institution, every single day, chooses to be a NACE member. They can leave at any time. They can join at any time. It is open. NACE schools choose to be members of NACE because they see value in what we do. And I think that is the best way to compete, right? If you want to compete, provide the best service, provide the best value. And I think there's a lot of overlap. Like, we compete in some areas. We work together in a lot of different areas, especially the people on this call. So it's not like this, by the way. And by the way, membership is the same too. So like, there's a lot more overlap than not for everyone in the entire Scholastic space. But that is where I hope to see the future going. I do know with most publishers, they are looking at closing that funnel, right? So thankfully, I've not heard anyone say a group, right? But I have heard many publishers say a trusted group of tournament operators, and that's where it comes down to, is trust. Rob said a great stewardship of the IP. They want to see people running it right, and specifically, let's be honest here, running it in a way that doesn't attract negative attention back to the publisher. That this is not big money for a publisher. Let's clear that up, right? But it does present a media disaster if it's done wrong, and that's where that trust element comes from. And trust, by its very nature, is shared with a few, not many.
That's a good point. And I know, just to draw on that example, is, I mean, we look at CRL and previously, where teams could earn a berth into the national playoff through a variety of other leagues, not just the official CRL competition. So that's just one example of what you're kind of referring to. Dan or Charlie, do you guys have anything you want to add on this topic?
Yeah, well, we looked at this when we first entered the field, and we saw the danger perhaps in being tied to certain publishers, and the control that could give the publisher to eliminate what you're doing. And so we decided, we're not going to be married to any one publisher. We have 14 games, and we hope that'll be 20 and 25 games. And so if as likely will happen. More publishers decide to pull back and maybe control the intercollegiate space for their game on their own. And don't want to make use of the ECAC. We'll still have we'll still be doing fine in terms of offering a diversity of games and allowing for participation and all that. So I agree with what the others have said here. But we're trying to keep this open and what's best for the whole ecosystem and for esports generally. And I do think when we limit, there's dangers there. And I do think the games can be fleeting. I don't know that what we're looking at now in 5-10 years, it's not like baseball and football and volleyball where in 100 years kids will still be playing those. The likelihood is they won't here, and technology changes and young people's taste changes. And so that's kind of why we've structured ours the way we have.
Charlie, anything from your perspective on that one? Oh, you're muted, I think.
I approach this from like an educational perspective. So I have kind of like a small, really close-knit community. All my colleges pretty much are under the same umbrella. So they know of each other, right? So if you, let's say you're playing games with your friends, a lot of our stuff, even in our league, falls under community license agreements. So you can just apply for it as long as you're not making big bucks off of it. There's obviously tiers in a lot of these community license agreements that you can fall under. You can use this IP for as long as you want. But I also want to say to Dan, like, these can be flashes in the pan, and a lot of these are. And honestly, any publisher knows that if a league is playing your game, that's free advertising for you. And if they're locking it down, it's because they're trying to monopolize it. And ultimately, I mean, I think we all kind of know who we're talking about here, but we're not going to say any names. But I will say, like, a lot of the publishers are pretty hands off, and I'm happy about that. And they genuinely care about their community enjoying their game. There's very few that I've seen otherwise. So I think we're trending in a positive direction.
Just want to add though, maybe not so positive. I totally agree. So we go with licensing, but the community guidelines something we pay attention to. It's always big news when it's updated. They have not gotten more open. They have gotten smaller and smaller in terms of ways to utilize that. I just want to run counter to that point. I don't want to name it published, but you guys, you paid attention the last 3 months. You've seen new community guidelines come out, and if you compare them to the ones last year, they are more restrictive. Absolutely, there's no way around it. There's literally more bullet points saying why you're not part of the community guidelines, just so you can physically count them, than there were last year.
My community is not large enough to where I would be restricted under those guidelines. So I'm limited in terms of the number of schools that I can have because I'm at a 64 university cap. There's no real way that my university would ever, or my conference would ever really break a community license agreement.
Well, I do have
yeah.
I do have a quick question, and I think we talk a lot about what we don't want publishers to do, and I guess my curiosity is, what do we want them to do? And my question is, and I was talking to an unnamed publisher, a representative from them, a couple months ago, and they had basically said something like, yeah, a game that we have that's really popular right now, people are running tournaments on it. It's the tournament scene is really picking up. And we are getting hit up because like certain tournament organizers that are around, around the U.S. and abroad, are not paying people their prize winnings, and they're not going by running a good and reasonable business. And unfortunately, we have to crack down because us as the publisher are negatively affected by that. People say it's not about whether or not it's this organizer. People just tie it with the name of the game and say, yeah, tournaments are bad for this game. The scene is bad, whatever. So I guess my question is if you're a publisher and you are faced with that problem, what do we want them to do? Because they do have to have some level of control over their brand. On the other hand, everyone here has a history of running good, clean events. What are our expectations? What are our asks?
So there's a couple things I'll outline. It's a non-exhaustive list. There's more. There's always more that we'd love to see. The first off, fundamentally, there are some tools in game that are restricted to those who have a licensing, which but are incredibly helpful in running competition, right? Or for running broadcasts. Um, for example, Fortnite, right? They have a spectator mode. Now that is by approval only, but fundamentally, it makes running large competitions astronomically more efficient, easier stats, more like 100% accuracy on stats. Those are the things that needs to be in the hands of more groups. League of Legends with Riot, they have a whole suite of tools to make this a better experience for all involved, but they are usually locked behind different doors and what level of trust or contractual agreement you have. I would like to see those more democratized. I understand there's technological limitations on why that might not be possible in every case, but that's one of those rising tide things that just literally lifts everyone up, to where the tools are there. If you want to use them, great. If you don't, that's fine. You can continue to do it however you were doing it, but it gives you the tools to take it to the next level. um, and so that's the one component. The other component is, I have to look at this both sides, because I have to kind of anticipate people's responses, especially in negotiations or contractual agreements or anything like that. It's exactly that fear. It goes back to that trust component. um, and why publishers are getting more restrictive of who's running competition in their IP. I would like to see more than one company approved, though. That's the big thing. But yeah, I get it. It's a give and take, right? You gotta protect the IP while providing value to your customers, however those customers may look. Um, and as long as you do that, I think there should be a level of trust and a level of access to run competition.
It's a great point. I'm sure you all have a list of things you'd request if a developer called you up and asked, what do you need from us? I don't know how many times that conversation happens or if it does, but I'm sure you all have a running list there. But a really important topic as we continue on into the esports industry and what it is today. And what it is today is not what it's going to probably look like in 3 to 5 years. So let's talk about your guys' vision for collegiate esports over the next 3 to 5 years. What's the trend, the general trend of where we're going? What is your biggest hot take of what collegiate's going to look like? This is your moment to kind of give your vision of what you think collegiate's going to look like in 3 to 5 years, and to give the tournament organizers and a little time to think about it. Let's give Andrew the first crack at this one.
I wanted to listen to everyone else and say something smart.
Sorry.
Why would you call me out like that?
I don't know.
You're not copying off our homework. Get your own answer.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have a few opinions about this. And I was talking about it a little bit earlier. From my perspective, my biggest goal is holistically achieving buy-in about the concept of gaming and esports from all of the different stakeholders of this industry. And again, I think that's a big thing on parents. In some might say, well, yeah, you got adults, they're kids, they're adults in college. Really, why do parents matter here? But remember, those kids who go to college to play esports come from middle school. They come from high school. Usually they're competing in hopefully as a part of an official high school esports team. And they're going in more and more and more. And we've conducted studies and surveys, and I'm sure many of you have too. They are selecting where they're going to college, or they're deciding what they want to major in, or they're deciding if they want to stay in college, oftentimes a considerable percentage because of the fact that they're in esports. And so from my perspective, getting more thought leadership out there and education to parents about why this is important, getting, as this evolves as a business, being able to actually quantify the ROI of implementing an esports system. If I am a school, especially if I'm a community college, or I'm someone smaller, getting people everywhere from the operator level all the way up to the executive level at these different institutions to understand the benefits, why they'd be doing it. And a lot of people are trying to accomplish, but frankly, it's just going to take time. It's a cultural movement, and those things take time. And I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I do know that it will be better once that is achieved.
An investment in infrastructure is going to be one of the biggest things we'll see over the next few years here. That, those seeds are being planted now. We and others have conversations with schools of all different sizes that are building facilities or building places and building safe places for not just their varsity team, but for gamers on campus, and being able to embrace and define new ways. And listen, I'm not advocating for an esports major by any means. However, there's plenty of benefit for career development that if you look at hospitality, and particularly with these venues, or networking and IT, and very much broadcast production in the lens of esports, these are real jobs that are available today. They're going to be available times 10 in the next 5 years. So from a collegiate perspective, preparing and helping prepare these schools for this wave that is already arrived. We know that this is here and the demand is here, but letting and making sure that schools of any size are able to fund this, that their schools and administrations, if they need help being able to figure out, why, this equals more screen time to me, which is something we see both in college and in high school, being able to break through stereotypes that are just outdated at this point. Us knowing that, what you can do with a 5-on-5 team, and the teamwork and the benefits from being able to work within not just varsity, but being part of a community, can have lifelong benefits. So the infrastructure is really a good start to that. That's what we're going to see as a big catalyst over the next few years here across every level of collegiate.
That's great. Dan, what does esports kind of look like in collegiate 3 to 5 years, and maybe even touching on what ECAC might look like at that point?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think it's important that we're always thinking about this, but it is dangerous to predict, and really can be dangerous to place bets. And with those things in mind, we were careful not to, and we just wanted to build a beast and see where it took us, and accumulate schools and games, and then the publishers would have to deal with us, and we'd have the ability then to pivot if we needed to, or expand if we needed to. I do think it's clear that there will be more schools, and more schools embracing esports generally. Some of them just kind of put up with it, and we have everything. We have some that want to be national champions. We have others, it's a glorified club, and everything in between. I think you'll find more that really fully realize the benefits of it, and want to fund it, and take ownership of it. And it's clear that all of that is going to happen. I think it's clear there's going to be more competitors per school. One thing we love, we have more than 30 competitors per school. Of our 130 schools, we have about 3,500 participants, and I think you'll find more and more of that. But I do think the NCAA will not be involved. I think they might regret that. I think it was Title IX, and it was also the culture of esports, and this was in a pre-NIL NCAA, where they didn't want to jump in. Whether they would take another look at it now, I don't know, but the train may have left the station. So I don't think it will be within the NCAA. I think long-term, maybe not in 3 to 5 years, but long-term, maybe 10 to 15 years, it will be within the athletic departments. I think there's too many economies of scale. I was an athletic director almost in a prior life now, and you have fundraisers, and you have event management people, and you have arenas, and you have compliance, and all of these functions, which the bigger esports gets, the more they'll need. So I think it makes too much sense. But right now you have athletic directors who are kind of dinosaurs, and in their thinking about esports, and talk about a old boys club, and maybe some lack of diversity there as well, which is changing. But I do think that's part of the reason they're not embracing this. But I think eventually, as more schools take it on, they'll have to. But yeah, that's the best I could come up with, I think.
No, for sure. Charlie, talk about SUNY, talk about the collegiate esports, your vision. What do you see 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I guess 3 to 5 years in esports is almost like a lifetime, to be honest. It's hard to kind of predict in 2022 what the world will look like in 3 to 5 years. So I would say esports in 3 to 5 years, I'm going to hard agree with Rob here. Investment into specifically infrastructure, personnel. SUNY's already seeing it. I will highly suggest anybody that's building a program, anybody that's looking to make an investment, make sure that you go to your stakeholders with an ROI. Because if you're looking to just have them make this because this is the next cool big thing, well, you might get an initial investment, but it might not be sustainable. So ultimately, we're trying to achieve sustainability. I'm hoping over the next 3 to 5 years, a lot more grassroots, because that's what SUNY's at for the most part right now. A lot of grassroots, really highly engaged students, really passionate students, administrators that are like, holy cow, we've never seen this level of investment before. How do we capitalize on this? How do we engage them better? Creating that sustainability for like the foreseeable future. Because I remember a time when it wasn't cool to be a gamer. I remember a time when it wasn't cool to go to college and play video games, and now it is. So I want to make sure that this train keeps going. And so sustainability is the key. And I hope that over the next 3 to 5 years that is a major goal.
That's good. I hate this question, by the way. 4 years. If you asked me 4 years ago where I would be, this was not on my radar. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it was 3 years ago in 1 month, I saw my first esports coach job listing in my local area, and I laughed at it. And I didn't apply for that one. And then a month later, I got offered a different one, and I took it. So I hate this question just as much as you guys do. But so far, I'm loving the answers. Michael Brooks, you got the last word on this one.
Well, thanks a lot. Everyone took all the good ones. What did you guys leave me? Nothing. No, I'm kidding. Like I agree. Pretty much across the board. There's going to be more institution space, right? When NACE started in 2016, 6 schools, great. They formed NACE, but that hockey stick growth in terms of institutions, it hasn't slowed down. There's been no plateauing at all. It is just getting sharper and sharper. Um, the bigger thing that I want to focus on there is we do see still a lot of smaller programs starting at schools, very limited budgets, maybe a staff person, one coach running the program, but still expected to have 25, plus students. It burns people out. I think everyone gets that. It is getting better. My concern is that, and we're going through our strategic planning process right now. So this is like very relevant to me. Like we are literally have asked any NACE member knows exactly what I'm talking about, where they see NACE in 3 years, where they see their institution in 3 years. So like, it's funny that you're asking that because like, yeah, I think I probably might be one of the handful of people in the country right now who actually know, generally speaking, where the professionals think this is going. That is the primary concern, right? We're growing, we're growing. There doesn't seem to be a ceiling or a cap on the growth, but the resources are not keeping up, right? You're basically same number of staff, double the size of your program, go after it, right? And it's this disconnect between those on the ground who are doing it. And Dan, you mentioned this, right? Reporting to an athletic director, right? Or someone else on campus who's not really involved in the esports program. It's more of an administrative duty for them. It's really up to us to start bridging that knowledge gap, putting it in a language that makes sense for an administrator who is not a gamer, who might not even be a fan of esports, in a way that they can take that to their board of trustees, to the president, and start unlocking those funds because now there's a well-developed roadmap of where this is going and why we're doing this. That part, some schools do really well, some schools don't do at all, and we got to bring that to a better average.
Yeah, it's interesting that you each of you talked about the growth of esports. I want to just quick touch on what are the things outside or at an organization level for you guys that you guys are worried about or concerned about in the next 3 to 5 years. We touched on a little bit earlier publishers, but that's one topic you could touch on. But really quick, if someone wants to kind of hop in, I'll start with Rob. But like what are the other things above an institution level that you see 3 to 5 years as a concern or an opportunity?
Not just college, but the entire industry. How this infrastructure, the investment, how is it going to get paid for in a way that benefits the students, that benefits what we're all trying to build, and whether it's varsity programs or just the industry in general. The key concern is that sponsorship is by far the only way here to help monetize. And there's some that have fees, and certainly the nonprofits that have membership dues, but to pay for the growth and the coaches and the resources and the teachers in order to grow this. My concern is how are we going to do this from revenue pool wise? How can we collectively find new ways to make sure that this investment is going to be there? So we, certainly from CSL Esports and NACE StarLeague, we'll continue to look for new ways to help these schools grow, because it does take money. It just doesn't come out of nowhere. And these teachers, particularly the teachers and coaches, they need to be compensated to help build this as well. So, what concerns me is that we're growing, that is maybe outpacing the revenue sources. So finding new ways to do that is certainly our number one, priority from just the sustainability standpoint, to make sure that all this growth that we're talking about, all the infrastructure that we need, all the teachers and resources to go for these student athletes, we have to find a way to fund it. So that's my primary concern, is to help the schools, help the industry, help the infrastructure itself be able to be sustainable in that way. And we're going to figure it out. There's enough, smart, willing people. There are some distractors, like any industry, that are helping pull this in the wrong direction. And I think collectively the people here, and certainly many, many people that we work with as partners, we have some great people and leaders in this industry that really will be able to take that up and be able to do that over the next few years.
Andrew, final word on this one.
Yeah, I think I mean, most of what I'm going to say is gonna mirror what Rob said. I think people are there's a lot of companies that are raising way too much money into this space right now, and the problem is that when you raise a lot of money, you have to make a lot of money really quickly, and it doesn't support the more linear growth curve of what you can see across academics and in youth recreation and things like that. And the problem is we're seeing things like in we all saw the letters that were circulating talking about how, hey, exclusivity is needed, to be able to justify, all these great things that we're doing. And the reality is it's needed to basically justify, to do the business that was sold to a group of investors. And I think the problem with that, and by the way, that I know it sounds like I'm picking on one group, but you see it in more than one group. And the problem is that as Rob said, like the revenue opportunities aren't out there. And unfortunately you have these businesses that are raising a ton of money, and they have to force revenue. And you've got a ton of people who are very anti those businesses, who are coming out and saying, hey, this all needs to be free. And unfortunately, if everything's free, then you don't get to pay coaches, because there needs to be a revenue source somewhere. And it has this impact around absolutely everybody. So from my perspective, I think that's what needs to change. And the word sustainability gets thrown around a lot, but I think sustainability and the ability to create good revenue streams, to be able to go pay all the people involved the actual market rate, like what they're being paid in sports or what they're being paid in technology or all these other things. I think that is what needs to happen.
It's a great point. I want to thank all of you on this panel for joining me on this Friday afternoon. I know you all have very busy schedules cutting into your weekends, but I truly want to thank you guys for joining me, for answering some of these questions, for opening the lid a little bit to what you guys are thinking and encountering. I want to thank LeagueSpot, Andrew, and your team for all the work, production, for putting this together, organizing. I mean, Jaws, Amanda, the whole team. I mean, the whole team killed it. Thank you for that. And then thank you for everybody who joined listening. I know we have a lot of passionate folks in chat who are involved in the industry, and I'm excited that these talks are happening and that this information is being shared, because I think it's so important. I want to plug, before we sign off, next week, Friday, is part 2 of this panel, where we're going to have the actual soldiers on the ground, is kind of the moniker I've been using, but people on the ground who are working through building this amazing industry, and they're going to be on it. Check out the panel lineup. I'm stoked. I mean, it's stacked. I use stacked a lot, but it really is. I mean, these panels are getting good, and I'm really excited about it. Next week, next Friday, same time, 5 p.m. EST. I'm really excited about it. But thank you again, everyone.
Great job, Adam. Thank you. Thanks for assuming that.
Yeah, thank you, Adam.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Be sure to follow everyone at the Twitter below their photo on the screen. But again, thank you everybody for joining us, and have a great weekend.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you all.
Cheers.